There are no physical descriptions of Jesus anywhere in the Bible. That might sound like I'm stating the obvious, which I am. But in fact, I think it's really important to sometimes remind ourselves of that, because quite often things that appear to be obvious can get pushed aside if we don't pay attention to them by other things. In fact, not only is there no physical description of Jesus in the Bible, that's not an unusual thing, is it? Because there's literally no physical description of any of the characters in the Bible, unless it is important to their story. If it's a key part of the point of their story, then we get some information. For instance, the first residents of the Garden of Eden were naked. Goliath was a giant. We have a description of John the Baptist, right? He wore camel's hair, he had long hair and a long beard, and he ate locusts. He didn't drink. We know that because it's important to his story. He's a Nazarene, and he came out of the wilderness. So we know certain things about him. We only seem to get information about the appearance, the physical appearance of someone, when it's critical to the point of their story. I'm just going to say that again. Critical to the point of their story. Then we get a little information. But we have no physical description of Jesus. We know, at least in this part of the world, if I were to ask you to describe them, you would probably describe Moses looks like Charlton Heston, Noah looks like Russell Crowe, and Jesus looks like Ewan McGregor playing Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Star Wars franchise. That's real, by the way. There is a picture of Ewan McGregor as a young Obi-Wan Kenobi that is frequently mistaken for Jesus. Why? There's no physical description to suggest that Jesus looked like that or that Moses looked like that. And the key part of that, though, is Moses looked like. We don't say Charlton Heston looks like Moses, do we? Or that Russell Crowe looks like Noah. Actually, in fairness, Ewan McGregor did actually play Jesus in a movie, but that's neither here nor there. It's the picture from Star Wars that makes us think that's Jesus. He's not even the Jesus character in Star Wars. There is one, we'll talk after. Anyway, the point is, because there isn't one, we made one up. And in fact, if you live in this part of the world, I can tell you right now what is still and has been for over 50 years the most familiar and popular picture of Jesus. It's not Ewan McGregor. It's that painting that is frequently referred to as brown Jesus. And it's not because Jesus is brown, it's because the painting is brown. I think you know the one I'm talking about. Almost every church in North America probably has one. Because it became popular, we envisioned Jesus a certain way. The thing is, because there's no physical description of any of these characters from the Bible, it can, and very much cannot be, a good thing that we envision them a certain way. If you picture them a certain way, you may be picturing them in order to identify with them, right? You want Jesus to look like you because that's a way that you can connect with Jesus. If Jesus looks like me, I'm more likely to connect with Jesus. That way, I'm more likely to understand what Jesus is talking about. I'm more likely to engage Jesus because he looks like me. That actually isn't a bad thing. I'm coming to the bad part in just a second. That actually isn't a bad thing if what you're connecting with is what Jesus is truly about and not simply the appearance. I, for example, I'm about to tell two things I've told 1,000 times. I'm going to tell them 1,001. First of all, I think Jesus was probably kind of hefty. I don't think he was skinny at all. I think he was super healthy because he walked a lot. But I also think that the stories that we hear of Jesus sharing a meal with people are many, many more than we actually hear from the Bible. So I think he was a little rounder. Conveniently, so am I. I think Jesus was probably already starting to go gray in his 20s. But in saying that, I'm not using that as a way to justify that I appear this way. I'm not using it as a way to make Jesus be more like me so I can make you think that Jesus is more like me. I'm saying that because that kind of allows me to really connect with Jesus a little bit more and remind myself that I can be more like Jesus. And that my appearance, well, it may be repulsive to you, is fine for me. I'm absolutely okay with that. I'm still coming to the bad part. I'm not there yet. Some of you may know that my journey into ministry was not particularly smooth at all. And when I was a student, still a student minister in Bashaw, just finishing up my internship there 12 years ago, 14 years ago, I needed to think, so I went for a walk around town and I met Jesus on the street. It was Ben Wilson, but we'd just done Jesus Christ Superstar, and he was Jesus in Jesus Christ Superstar. If you know Ben, and you remember Ben from about 10 or 15 years ago, he looks like Jesus. Thing is, it occurred to me later that in meeting Jesus on the street, it wasn't just a question of meeting someone who played the character and looks a little bit like Jesus. It was a question of reconnecting with that experience, which was profound. That experience of building community through theater. In fact, while I was a student and I'd go back to St. Andrews for classes, I'd be constantly telling people there how churches should really look into community theater, because if you do it right, it's creating community and empowering people and building their spirits in a way that churches need to do. Of course, you need the right person in charge, but you know what I'm saying. And that's what I connected with. It wasn't just that Ben kind of looks like Jesus. He's not round enough. It was connecting with the spirit of what that's about. So the downside of that, of course, has been our tendency for 2,000 years to not physically represent Jesus as anything but exactly what we look like, which explains why you might envision Jesus to look tall, slim, have long, straight hair, a perfectly trimmed beard, blue eyes, very white skin. We've portrayed Jesus that way historically. Now, the title slide for the message and what's on the screen behind me, you may recognize this is somebody's forensic facial reconstruction of what a first century Jew would look like, based on historic, archaeological, anthropological information. It's that thing, you know, where they have a skull and then they put muscle and everything on it, like they basically form the features based on the shape of the skull and the sort of historic information that we have, right? Somebody did this in 2001, and that is what a first century Jewish male should look like. So it's entirely possible that Jesus looked like that. There is, of course, also the argument that because Jesus was unique and special, Jesus would have looked different. Sure, but then what would have been the point? I mean, if part of the point of Jesus is the divine becoming human, Why would you become something that looked different? Especially given how we tend to see with all of our senses and have difficulty with things that are different. If Jesus looked different from everyone else, it would be more of a challenge. It wouldn't help him. Remember, too, that Jesus was all about showing us that divine spirit is in us too, right? We're of the earth and of the divine spirit. Jesus wasn't just about showing us how to behave. Jesus was showing us how to connect with that and be that. In other words, to be what is our factory setting, good. That's what Jesus is about. In fact, Jesus frequently described himself, not his physical appearance, but as the bread of life. A thousand other ways in which Jesus would describe what he is and who he is and what he's about so that we could connect with that. Not his physical features, because that wasn't important. What's important is what Jesus is about. And so when we talk about who Jesus is, it has nothing to do with appearance. It has to do with spirit. It has to do with love and compassion and grace and kindness and all of that good stuff that is in you too. And that's the point. It's not a question of you changing and modifying your behavior. It's a question of you living out what is truly in you. So, throughout the Gospels, on numerous occasions, Jesus says to people, you're going to meet me again. I'm going to go, I'll be back. I did practice saying that like Schwarzenegger in Terminator, but it just wasn't working for me, so let's just go with Jesus says, I'll be back. You will meet me again. And there's two ways that usually occurs. One is that Jesus says, you will meet me again because I'll be back. The other is those words of comfort and encouragement that Jesus offers about where we're going. Right? In the Gospel of John, for instance, do not let your heart be troubled. I love that phrase. Basically, don't worry, but in a spiritual way. Don't worry, because in God's house there are many rooms. There's room for everybody, and I'm going to prepare a place for you. If that weren't the case, why would I tell you that I'm going to go and make a place for you and I'll be back for you? You'll meet me again. Those should be words of comfort. And that you'll meet me again because I'll be back should be words of encouragement, something to look forward to, a means of hope. But imagine hearing that for the first time. There's some anxiety there, especially when Jesus starts to say stuff like, you need to be ready, be prepared. Not like in The Lion King, be prepared. This is something different. You need to be ready. There's going to be a little bit of anxiety around that, I think. First of all, because if you're talking about meeting Jesus again in the way that we say things like, going to meet our Maker, and you don't know when that is, you'll have a little anxiety, first of all, about when that might be, but also, are you ready, because are you going to go there? For sure. Sidebar, yes, you are, because we all return to God. That's kind of part of Jesus' point also. But you might have a little anxiety around when and whether or not you're prepared for that. You might also have a lot of anxiety around the whole second coming thing, because quite often we associate that with all sorts of other things, apocalyptic things, like Revelation and all of that other good stuff that's so much fun. And so there might be a little anxiety not only about the occurrence of that and when, but are you going to be ready for that. Because surely at some point in this conversation, each time Jesus has said that, surely somebody said, "What do you mean prepared? How am I supposed to be prepared?" And not knowing that, since Jesus doesn't directly answer the question, not knowing that is even more anxiety. So just step away from those two things for just 1 second. What if Jesus didn't mean either in the next life or in the second coming? What if Jesus meant something different? What if Jesus, the Jesus who never describes himself in terms of his appearance or his me-ness, but only in terms of love and grace and compassion and the divine spirit which is in all of us, what if what he meant was, that's what you're going to see? Because the moment he told people that, 5 minutes later, they'd probably see it. It wouldn't look like the Jesus they were just talking to, but it's there. What if Jesus meant, you'll meet me again, not just in the person who obviously is loving and caring, but in those who are hard to love, who need your love and care? The marginalized and the poor and the sick, the hungry, all of that. What if Jesus meant, you will meet me again right now? So first of all, we've gotten rid of the whole, when's it going to be? Because it could be right now. But again, Jesus, how are we supposed to be prepared for that? Well, let's look at the rest of the life of Jesus, because Jesus seems to have been prepared for it every moment of the day. How? It's not just a question of being loving and caring and showing compassion and grace. There's empathy as well. There's being open to engaging others and finding who they are and how they are. Engaging them. There's building relationships on that. The life of Jesus is the instruction book for how to be prepared to meet Jesus. Not just in how we are to others in terms of that offering our love and grace and compassion, but also in hearing their stories, in meeting them where they are, in receiving their love. Think about the Good Samaritan story, right? It's not just a story about whether or not you're willing to offer care. It's also a story about whether or not you're willing to receive it. And what kind of relationship is built on that? That's how you be prepared. Jesus also doesn't say it's easy, nor that you're going to be perfect at it. But maybe that's why he offers so many examples. So many examples. You know, we always hear the stories in the Gospels. We hear the stories as if this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and Jesus never repeated himself. I bet he did. A lot. I bet he didn't just go to this place and share this idea, and then go to this place and share this idea, and then go to this place and share. I bet he repeated himself lots. That does not make for a great story. It makes for a long story. But nonetheless, I think he did, because he would have had to. And part of that repetition would be, look, because I'm just showing you who you are and what you are capable of. And how together we can create a community of love and grace. It's not just about the next life and that moment of the second coming. It's the next moment from now. If you start there, imagine how much, if those other two stories are important to you, imagine how much less anxiety you're going to have over that. Nobody's going to worry about where they're going because they're living like Jesus, so they know. Nobody's going to worry about what it's going to be like when Jesus meets us again and comes back because we see it all the time. And all that apocalyptic stuff, that death and destruction stuff, we're not going to worry about that either. Because the moment we understand that we meet Jesus every day, we know that isn't really necessary to change the world. What changes the world is being open to seeing Jesus every day, being prepared to meet Jesus every day.